Welcome, everybody, to this wonderful Nirvana panel. I've been thinking about this panel for, I think, years now, about how I get the best of the best people that are leaders in revenue and leaders in go-to-market together to talk about this one thing that makes the world go round. You know what it is? It's data. That's what it is. And you know what? Before you hear me talk more, because I have this tendency, let's go to our amazing panelists. Panelists, why don't you take about 12 and a half seconds to introduce yourself and then tell us about your worst data horror story. Walter, why don't we start with you?
Hello, everyone. This is Walter Alvendia, Deloitte consultant who focuses on sales transformations. And my data horror story, I think the biggest data horror story that I can remember, and I have a lot, was we had some accidental, let's call it, cancellations that happened because of an MDM project that went awry. Many clients, due to some transition from an old MDM to a new MDM, some new emails went out that say that accounts were canceled due to an MDM problem and switch. So thousands of notifications went out saying that the renewals were canceled, and that was craziness. So a data problem that was not good.
Oh wow, we got a hard hitter out of the bag. Wow, that's a good start right there.
I thought I'd start fun.
I love it. Todd, why don't you introduce yourself next and tell us a little bit of your data horror story?
Yeah, Todd Abbot. I'm the CEO here at Insight Squared, but I've been a CRO/global marketing exec for mid-cap, large-cap for better part of the last 25 years. My data horror story goes to something that exists in a lot of companies, which is the friction between sales and marketing. I was a CRO in a business that had a pretty high percentage of dependency on leads to convert to business within quarter. And I had a CMO that actually changed the criteria for tier 1 leads because they were struggling in volume. And so they literally moved the goalpost on me, but I couldn't figure it out till about 60 days into the quarter when the quality of leads was dropping. And by that point, it was too late to catch up. And it was my worst nightmare relative to executing to the quarter, which the CRO is always accountable to it.
Oh, wow. Ooh, Walter, I think you might have been beat. As a CMO, I can relate to the data horrificness of that. Todd, I think we'll circle back to that one. Mr. Jeff, who are you and what is your data horror story?
So many so many of those stories. Which one to choose? My name's Jeff Coveney. I'm CMO at Digital Pie. We help companies with their marketing automation. All right, where to start with this one? I guess maybe talk about alignment. We were just talking about alignment, right? So working on a project that this is a while back, and some data was getting changed in the system. Had to update all of the records. Well, what ended up happening is when that data got updated, it started shooting up some of the lead scores because the lead scoring wasn't turned off. So what happens when that happens? It threw off all these alerts to the sales team over a weekend, like a lot. I think it was like 1,000 plus going off to the sales team. So they weren't too thrilled with that process. And just an example of how you have to get your data right and make sure your systems are supporting whatever you're going to do when you make changes.
The amount of dollars we could have had for the amount of times that we had misalignment between sales, marketing, and data, right, gentlemen?
Yeah.
Why don't we start with that a little bit? Okay, both the last horror stories with that, and also Walter, yours was. So why don't we talk a little bit about the pitfalls, the typical things that you see when the go-to-market teams are not aligned on definition of data, terminology of data, and then let's talk about when can we get away from that and actually talk about insights. So why don't any one of you jump in and tell us a little bit about why do you think there's friction of data in the first place, and how do you work to resolve it?
I'll start off. I mean, I think the number one source of the friction is that we have evolved from a very functional view with functional tech stacks and functional metrics and functional measures of success. And that, we, from a B2B standpoint, worked fine when you had long sales cycles and you didn't have the dependencies within quarter. As the in-quarter demands and has increased, the dependencies between those functions has become so much more critical. that the friction feels much louder now relative to its noise factor, because the dependency and the alignment from an execution standpoint now is so critical cross-functionally that it's become more obvious. With things in the past, you could live with it because it was a 6 to 9 month sales cycle. Now you can't.
Yeah, I mean, I look at, the data side is, years ago is what you're getting for data from the form fill, right? You're trying to add in all the industry information and so forth. And, the expectations are a lot higher today, because now you can take that data, you can append that when that comes in, and, bring in your industry from an append perspective, or, bring in intent data, which is great. So you're appending all that data all the time. And there's a lot of expectations that you want to have, marketing's bringing in some of that data, but sales wants that data like, someone ready to buy right away. And it's a good thing, because we're progressing as within the industry.
Yeah, I'd add also that, with the data being now exposed through automation or, machine learning, that a lot of the inaccuracies of the data, is being exposed now. So people are seeing, oh my gosh, this is not the data I want, or, it's not information that I can use now because it's poor data, right? And that's being exposed now with all the kind of automation and machine learning that's happening now with the clients that I'm working with. So
yeah, I think just the one thing I'd add is I think we're moving from, historically it's all been about volume, volume of leads, volume of opportunities in the funnel, and volume doesn't cut it anymore. You've got to be much more focused on quality of leads. How are they converting? Quality of opportunities. And the challenge is, how do you assess quality? Requires a lot more data and a lot more of the machine learning and analytics, because if you're going to depend upon people, it's going to be hard to scale. Mm-hmm. But we move from quality to quantity, from quantity to quality. And that's what's causing a lot of the misalignment and need to be much more aligned cross-functionally.
So what I'm hearing from you is, all of you, is that data is now a necessity. It's the bare minimum to have data accessibility and availability. But now I'll age myself a little bit. In the age of marketing many, many moons ago and years ago, it was all about making decisions with limited data. Now, I don't think limited data is the issue. Mm-hmm. It's actually the reverse. It is the abundance of data, but organizing it well. Mm-hmm. So how do you address that? Who helps you address that? And what are the processes and the cross alignment in order to address it as a team and not just on your own? Go ahead.
I'll start again. I think what you're talking about is, as the tech stacks have evolved, each of those tech stacks and the components, the average number of tech stacks in the marketing tech stack and the sales tech stack has just absolutely ballooned over the last 5-6 years. And each component's creating more data. The challenge is, how do you get the data out of each of these systems and deliver an end-to-end view? And that's what's driving this move to a RevOps function. If you're making decisions within silos and buying best of breed products to solve a specific marketing function or a specific sales function or customer success, and creating more data that doesn't enable you to tie it all together, it's going to be very difficult to scale the business and optimize. And so what we see is an awful lot of movement toward bringing those functions together, either virtually or hard, into a RevOps. So you're now taking a strategic view to your tech stack and to your data. Right? If I go back to my horror story, the fact that I had a marketing function that had its own data, its own metrics, and the definition, and I had mine, but if it was one function that was combining all of the data and the metrics and the handoffs, then that would never have happened. And so we see this movement to RevOps being very, picking up a lot of speed to be able to address some of those inefficiencies of data and end-to-end view.
Yeah, oops, sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, with data, we're seeing everybody wants data. Like, we need to capture the data. We need to capture the data. We need more of it. And, the first question we'll tend to ask is, well, what are you going to do with it, right? Like, how are you going to be able to execute on that? Great examples of, you want the data because you want to create some personas, or maybe you want to, really get down and define your ICP and create nurturing campaigns. And then what ends up happening is you get all the data and you start to build the personas, and you haven't created the content yet, right? You have to have you have 4 personas and you have early, mid, and late, and you want to create content for all of that, and then they end up sometimes only doing one stream of content. So the data enables, but you got to think about how you're going to move beyond just collecting that data and make that a little bit more active.
Yeah, and I'd add also is to the point earlier of a common sort of definition, right? In terms of instead of these silos, right? It's really about, are we all agreeing to the definition of this data, right? That's the challenges that I'm seeing with companies that I consult with is, marketing has their definition as previously mentioned, right? And sales has their definition. And even if you go downstream to customer success, they have their definition. So now you have this challenge, right? Of, well, what does this mean? What is an account, or what is a parent, or what is a child, right? Of this legal entity, so on and so forth. And that's the challenges that we're facing, our clients are facing. And this is where we help them and say, okay, well, let's come together, as mentioned, right? A RevOps, view of things, or even a customer lens view of it, right? Because a product for them might be different than an experience or a solution that they want. And that's where the data comes in to say, here's how we can potentially, as you mentioned, content, right? What is the content we want to push to our sellers that comes from the data that we're receiving from downstream or upstream, right? Marketing or customer success.
So as you build this maturity model, let's say we call it the maturity model towards a centralized, agreed upon data structure, data terminology, and agreed upon conversation that you stop talking about my data, your data. Well, I show the leads as 2x what will you show? Well, I show the leads is not effective. Or but who cares about the leads? You care about pipeline. Those are so much fun conversations we've all wasted probably days and days on. What is the next step? Who owns the data for you? You mentioned RevOps. Who do they report to? Who coaches them? How do they serve everybody while not being part of anybody's organization? Why don't we talk a little bit about that stage and when and how to coach them?
What I see, this move to RevOps is in my opinion, and what I see is the best solution to this challenge. You've got to take it out of the functional orientation to drive an end-to-end view. I typically see that the biggest inhibitor to moving that is the analytical capabilities of the C-suite, and do you have a C-suite structure that has the courage and discipline to drive it? When you have a COO, it tends to be pretty easy because that's a logical place. But marketing doesn't want to give up its tech stack. Sales doesn't want to give up theirs. Customer success doesn't want to give up theirs. And so it takes a CEO, president to be able to have the courage to say, hey, we're going to consolidate this and we're going to drive a harmonization across to be able to have an end-to-end view. And so what I find is that the decision criteria tends to be as much characteristics of the org structure and characteristics of the CEO. Because the CEO struggles with, you get into the MBO, MBR, QBR, and every function brings its version of the truth, right? They bring their own data, BYOD, and it's the qualitative analytics, and it's so hard for the exec team to rationalize, well, you say this, I say this. And so the RevOps function just kind of takes the noise out of the system. And I believe that's where most structures are going to go.
Yeah, we see this a lot. I'll comment on that as personally. The RevOps structure obviously helps you have one single source of truth.
That's right.
And one single source of data owner, right, guys? But
yeah.
But in the beginning, especially if we're coaching many startups that are probably the B stage, or well, stages have gone away with capital, but let's say traditional B, C stage, and they're thinking about, okay, I'm trying to go up market, I'm consolidating my tool set and that. So from a data approach, analytics and insights approach, if there's no COO, if there's no VP of business operations, should the CRO be the one to define RevOps? Should it be only the analytics and then everybody owns the ops, not the analytics piece? How do you see this evolving, and how would you coach people that are in positions of a CRO, CMO to approach RevOps as a maturity model?
I love that. It's such an evolving process right now. Right? Where's that going to go? Is the CRO, right? So that does it go there into marketing? I mean, I tend to see more with earlier stage companies that marketing's tending to drive some of the strategy and drive some of the names coming into the system, the targets, that marketing will own that data piece, but then sales wants to bring in their data, right? So it is definitely a little bit siloed, but ideally you're bringing that all together. So I mean, any recommendation would probably be just understand that's a process. As you evolve as an organization, you'll want to bring that data together, into more of a single system with single management.
Yeah, and what we're seeing in many of our clients is, as you mentioned, if not at the CO, but a chief data officer who may sort of instill the guiding principles of how we're going to standardize or come to agreements on what the data structure will be, right? They're going to set the stage for the conversations, right, of bringing best practice of how they are going to bring that future data together, from all areas, right? So this is not working in silos. It's everyone coming together. So here's the information that I need in my respective area, right? And coming to a common agreement. So that's, again, back to that common data definition, right? But someone's coming to the table. It's like, here's how I see we should do this in order to meet our revenue and business objectives, right?
What about when the traditional, thank you for that. There's a traditional, I think, Todd, you alluded to this, lead and then throw over the fence mentality, where if you have RevOps and you have a mentality of data alignment, should go away. So remember the old days, or maybe the current days, are marketing throws this big fishnet, catches a few basketballs, it throws it to a BDR, they do a double dribble, maybe try to do a layup, miss a few times, eventually get it in, and then it gets handed to the AE. But everybody looks at something else. Where do you see the data being focused and maybe bringing in functions together, maybe in outbound and ABM, if we can talk about that, as data and tools serving them all together? How have you seen this progression and the more modern toolkit that marketers, RevOps, CROs have to focus everybody on the same target accounts and ICP? Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on with your company or clients that you work with about getting to this level?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think that what I'm seeing is the big limitation we've had in the revenue process relative to data. While there's a lot of data coming in from various sources, we've been missing one key piece, which is engagement level from the customer. We historically have relied extensively on the reps' input into the CRM system, and I think we would all violently agree that reps don't like living in CRM and will give you the least amount of information.
You're so right about that.
Yeah. I mean, there's no ROI for a rep to provide the input. And so that's the big piece that we've been missing. And if you think about every engagement is basically, the health of it is assessed by, is your value prop resonating and is the customer responding to your team? Whether it's a BDR, whether it's a rep, whether it's customer success, if your value prop resonates, they'll respond to emails, they'll schedule meetings, they'll look at your attachments, they'll engage. It's worth their time. We historically have been relying on interrogating of reps to assess, is this deal a good deal or not? And that's got to go away. Like I have now convinced, I've wasted way too many of my years beating up reps to give me data. I moved the needle that much. And so getting them out of the data entry business, but getting the data to be able to assess the health of a lead. Is the customer responding to that BDR, to the rep, to the customer success on a renewal? Having that level of data and visibility, deal level, as well as sales process oriented, do you really know what the engagement level looks like at key inflection points to be able to assess a deal that's going off the rails really quick without having to do an interrogation of the rep? That's where we're going. And I think it's going to change the science of the revenue process like never before.
Yeah, I mean, alignments, we keep talking about alignment, right? It's so key between marketing and sales. There are enough things that cause friction between marketing and sales. Having sales try to go ahead and input data, it should not be one of those those things that cause friction. We just collecting data consistently is so important. We always talk about with our clients, making sure you know all of your ports of entry, right? So your ports of entry are, you're going to go ahead and bring folks in from a webinar. You're going to bring folks in from a trade show, or maybe there's some content syndication. So bringing that data in and making sure it's consistent is really important.
That's right.
Yeah, I think as well, to Todd's point earlier, in terms of the data entry, so on and so forth, a lot of our clients are looking at how do they automate some of these common activities, right? This data entry, and using automation to say, all right, they don't have to do this. This is going to be done automatically, right? To take out that work that they don't want to do anyway, right? So a lot of clients are looking at that and implementing these kind of solutions for that automation.
That's right. And when you do, you're going to find that the amount of data. So when we deploy our activity engagement profile, we're typically adding about 10 times the amount of data to an opportunity and to an account record. And that's only going to make it harder to rely on the export from Salesforce and ops to be able to do analytics on it. Like, there's too much data. There's no way that model is going to work anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So the topic around understanding data governance and making it serve you versus making it something that salespeople want to kill and hate, even hearing the word. Think about always the worst rated session at a kickoff or a marketing training will always be the data governance, with the CRM owner for a person comes in front of the sales team and tell them, please, can you please mark the competitive loss reason number 2 so that we can have a win-loss report next quarter for the board, right? We've all been there, right? So how do we avoid
do that all the time?
Yeah, it's what I call Tuesday. But it's an interesting thing. So if you go back, like, should we use natural language processing? Is there like a sentiment we can grab from the call recordings of what they do? What are these processes? I know, Walter, you touched upon it, that you guys think can help, instead of, a carrot and a stick, just have something that is completely automation. There's so much automation going on in sales tools. What about the one-to-one data entry that a salesperson has when having an account discussion? Are you seeing those things coming to life?
I think with this, when you look at what sales needs to do, we hear from sales folks that, they get too much that they're entering in, or there's just too many processes, right? You need this piece of data because you need to be able to, maybe they're using some type of sales process like Medic or whatever it is, that you need that data in the system to be able to move that through. So whatever we can do, as an organization, as organizations and leaders, is trying to make that process a little bit easier for the sales reps. So that might be, maybe it's not as much as the data entry. Maybe it's, it's trying to automate more of like the proposals, right? Like take away some of that paperwork, take away some of that process. And maybe it's some of the data, right? Maybe they can enter in a record and they don't have to enter in everything, because that data then gets, appended. I'd love to see more on the information of like taking that data from a call and putting that in.
Yeah, automation.
Yeah.
The natural language, yeah. And along those lines, Todd, maybe you have some ideas about, the number one metric we can solve for, if we could, is giving sales time to sell. Right?
Yeah, I think, and that's where I think you got to leverage technology to get the rep out of the data entry business. I mean, they're only going to give you the bare minimum, and past due, they never keep track of past due stuff. They never put in the next. One of the things that they typically are really bad at is adding contacts. So we spend a lot of time on adding contacts on the front end and enriching for your BDRs on outbound. But once you get a qualified deal, the reps are going to give you the minimal amount of contacts. So how do you implement an effective ABM program where you don't really you're not capturing who in fact your team is engaging with, and being able to enrich it with titles and personas to be able to have effective nurturing campaigns in a sales engagement, or even on a cross-sell upsell to an established account, right? We all have, any SaaS-based company has a big licensing database on their users, but it doesn't typically get translated into the CRM system with an enriched set of personas, titles, to be able to do an effective nurturing campaign to support, whether it's a CSM or sales. And so I'm a big believer, you just got to get the reps out of that game. And there's now technology that can automatically identify who your team is engaging in, partnering with Ringlead to be able to enrich it. So marketing now doesn't have to depend on sales providing the input. Like, the sales team doesn't need to be involved. There's no more administrative burden to who they're engaging with, how they're engaging, when they're engaging. And so we're entering a new world of digital transformation and the science of sales. And the beauty of it is that we're not going to put more administrative burden on the rep, right? Like, to go back to your point, I used to have this anytime somebody wanted to make a change to Salesforce on a mandatory field, because everybody wants to make mandatory fields. Finance wants some, product management wants some, marketing wants some. And I just always had a rule to say, how many clicks is that mandatory field? And what are you going to do with it? Like reason codes, I've seen some customers with 15 reason codes. Do you really need 15 reason codes? No. Like, if you leave people to their own devices, they'll over engineer sales, the CRM system, to the detriment of the rep. And that's your most expensive resource. So you got to have some discipline, and you got to use automatic data capture and machine learning to populate those fields with the minimal amount. And then, to the point we made before, let's make sure the data you're collecting, you're going to go drive analytics and insights. You're going to do something with it. Otherwise, why are you collecting? Yeah,
it's funny, Todd, when you talk about like creating the, those fields, not only are you causing an issue for the sales team, you're causing more collection of data that's inconsistent. So you might have like reason 1, reason 2, favorite color. There's just, so which is the field that you use? I've seen like so many times where you have like different industry fields. What do you do with that? Right. Like,
right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I think another thing as well, to sort of reduce that burden of the data that you're collecting. Many of our clients are looking at their top sellers to say, what is the information that they're using and they're gathering and saving to say, and then say, okay, that's right. That's the information we need. And then maybe push that down to your newbies or your new sales reps in order to speed up, right? To say, I don't need 100 fields. My top reps are getting 10 fields, and that's enough. And they're selling with that data, right? So that's, there's a variety of ways to do it, but that's something we've seen with our clients.
Yeah, Walter, I can't agree with you more. I mean, I've always struggled running big teams. I always knew who my best reps were.
Yep.
Right? Guys and gals that are consistently executing.
Yep.
And I would consistently either bring a consultant in or have my field enablement team say, hey, go tell me what they're doing. Because that's what we have to replicate in the bell curve or on the onboarding. And inevitably they'd come back with nothing I could really grasp, because frankly, a lot of what they do is intuitive and they don't even know how to answer the questions. And you typically give the best reps the most amount of latitude not to put their data in the CRM when you actually need that even more. Right? So now when you can capture actually what are they doing, how are they using the marketing content, when are they using it, how are they presenting it in meetings. So the ability to get all that data now to say, hey, these are the top 25, field enablement, go replicate that without burdening those best sales reps. Because when you burden them, at some point they go, listen, this is too administrative. Like, I just want to sell, and they'll leave.
Yeah, I think identifying across the top working elements of your go-to-market, whether it starts with a mini campaign or a roundtable that you did, why did it work? What is the data trail? Replicating it, and then your top salespeople. Okay, what have they done? Like, instead of making them fill out 750 fields and then adding a new field because we should capture that. We should capture that. I love those conversations. Right? Consistency and being able to report back so that you see the baseline change is also important. So less fields, keep them the same over time, so at least you can actually report and do a trend report. One thing that I would like to ask you guys to comment on regarding that is, I think we're going back a lot of time to call recording and about centralized enrichment and automation. Are there any specific processes or tools that you think about you implemented or implement for clients that have helped you actually take these salespeople time away recently? Whether it's an interview, maybe with an enablement person, and then bring them to a teaching session. What else has helped you? Or it's some kind of process automation that you've put in place? Because we seem to have like a real agreement that this is a very important piece. What have you done recently that has actually helped that in some way?
I'll start with this one. There are a lot of different areas that you can focus on, but I think where we see the most benefit is when the earlier in the process that you can bring that data to be right, the better, because certain things are not going to happen down the road. So, just a couple of examples. Maybe you're bringing in data from a trade show or some other place. Being able, when that data comes in, if you don't normalize that data in the spreadsheet, maybe let some systems do that. It might be your marketing automation platform that goes ahead and changes California to CA or vice versa. Or leveraging a solution like a Ringlead, right? That's going to go and do some of that normalization, but do it first, because if you let that go on, here's what happens if you don't fix that California to C. If you're normalizing on California to CA, that lead, that record might not sync over to your Salesforce platform, causing errors, or maybe you have some lead routing that's set up based on the full state name, and it's not going to get routed properly, right? So all those things can start to happen when the data starts to age a little bit through the process, and it's not addressed right up front.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think one of the big issues most customers deal with is the quality of their data, the quality of their customer data. A lot of duplications, a lot of not enriched. And when you have teams spending time doing their own research, like that is the worst, most ineffective cost performer of where you want valuable resources put. And so spending the time to get good quality contact data, and then getting them out of the data entry business is it's got to be your number one priority. You can't burden the rep. So you're asking me to comment on the tools we use. This is why I joined Insight Square, frankly, because when I saw the technology of our company, not to do a commercial, but the light bulb went off in my head that getting into these one-on-one forecast funnel reviews and beating people up to give me quality of data was just never going to work. And so stop trying. I don't care if you think it's mandatory. Like your reps are only going to give you the minimal amount because they want to sell. That's the ROI to them. And so capturing the data on the front end relative to the context, who they're engaging, enriching. So marketing's got a good, robust data set to support, whether it's new sales or nurturing into the base, starts with the customer and having personas and titles that enable you to put those effective nurturing campaigns. And then capturing the engagement to know where's your sales process working and where it's not. Do you know where you win and why? Do you know where you lose and why, to be able to drive the continuous improvement? And that's a cross-functional involvement.
Definitely. So I think we talked a lot about the data and the value of it and all that. So I think now if we take a summary of all the stuff we discussed and put it together into this amazing slogan, what would it be? What is this data nirvana state of a company that you think should have? You wake up in the morning and you say, I don't think about data anymore. That could be data nirvana. Or you go and you're able to do magic without even going to look at 3-7 screens or shout at somebody or say, I don't understand the data. That's for me, by the way, heads up. What is the state of nirvana of your data in your company now, and in order to help you grow and scale would be? What would it be?
Yeah, Nirvana for me is moving from, historically, we've been very focused on metrics-based reports to be able to interpret the current state of data. But it's very people-dependent, experience-dependent. And where we're moving to is systems that take all these data, all these sources, and provide a predictive capability, whether it's deal, whether it's funnel, whether it's lead source, is being able to quickly take a lead with a score, seeing how the engagement is, and being able to get much more predictive on conversions through the whole sales process, whether it's a conversion of a lead, a conversion of an SQL, a conversion of a renewal, a conversion of a cross-sell. Each one of those categories has a different engagement profile. But if you've got the data and the analytics, like we're going to be moving into much more of a predictive. So you're going to know exactly where you are and what to go focus on as a cross-functional team like never before.
I'm trying to write down some slogans.
Love it.
So I guess I'll start with I got a couple concepts I'm bringing together. So early and often, and align, which leads to a better alignment. So what I mean by that is early. As soon as that data is starting to come in, you want to basically go ahead and bring that, enrich it as much as you can with the demographics, technographics, whatever data, any intent data. So that's going to help the sales people make better decisions. But data changes, right? So being able to adjust that data and see that data change over time is going to make that, that experience better for, for that particular person. So what I mean by align better, well, once you have that data and you don't have the sales rep have to go ahead and do everything to the data, and marketing's not doing as much because the systems are doing it, they can focus on a conversation together with better data. So early and often drives better alignment. You guys gonna pick that up for your slogan?
Oh, it's already in Twitter.
Yeah, all right. I don't have any fancy slogans, but I think I'll just add, and I'll hammer the point is really, I mean, I think Nirvana for me is a common definition, right? End-to-end definition. I know we're speaking a lot about the upfront with sales and marketing, but I really think about the customer, right? If you think about a SaaS model, right? You think about customer success and that data feeding back upfront to say, oh my gosh, the common definition, agreed to is what I think data Nirvana is.
Yeah, I love the terminology aspect of it that comes together. I've given this a lot of thought over probably, 30 podcast interviews and others about this. For me, it has to be around the caddy approach. It's the caddy that helps me make a decision for the specific focus that I'm looking at forward and not backwards, that is objective because it needs to fit the company's goal. I believe that the Nirvana state of data and utopic and understanding what we do should always focus us on not what I just see, i.e. Todd, going back to your example, we started off with this is my leads, because as a marketer, honestly, I can create 1,000 MQLs with days with budget. But how they're going to convert, payback, and all that in pipeline, the currency we all agree on. So the objectiveness of forward-facing decision-making without trying to get the data for that, maybe that's an Nirvana state of data because it can help us go forward.
Yeah.
So I'm always trying to think that way, if that makes sense. As one of the most important pieces of the data Nirvana panel is we always end with magic. Magic means I'm now going to give you guys a magic wand, fairy dust, an axe, whatever your tool of choice is as a magician. And you're going to go and be elevated to guru status. And you're going to come back to either your earlier self or to the hundreds and hundreds of founders out there in the world that come and beat up CMOs and CROs and others around, why don't we 3X our pipeline by one day, and why would we 2X our conversion yesterday? And tell them something that they should know that maybe their CMO, CROs are they afraid or not well equipped to tell them, or your earlier self to say, apart from don't go on this panel with alone, which is very, very nice thing to do, what else would you tell yourself? Go ahead, gentlemen.
I'll start again.
All right, go ahead, Todd.
I've made a couple of shifts later on in my career, most recently, in how I look at the sales process that I wouldn't have believed a year ago that I now have a pretty big conviction of. And it kind of goes back to, we have grown up in a world where we think of everything in sales stages, and sales stages are really important. They're important more from an onboarding and from an engineering the steps in the process on marketing, content, and enablement. But I think what's going to happen and where I moved is I really don't care about sales stages when I think about a funnel. And I wish I had learned this much earlier, because it goes back to the point of how do we determine the quality of the sales stage? It's based on the rep. And reps are not very good at keeping things at the proper sales stage because they don't care. There's nothing in it for them. And so if you're going to depend upon looking at a funnel, the quality of a funnel by sales stages, you're still dependent upon the rep. Now we'll be able to, with UI, be able to automatically put things into the proper stage. But in reality, every sales process is a series of meetings where you're just trying to get everything lined up to when that key meeting is with the right decision that they're going to make a decision. And so I wish I had an understanding of meeting conversions as a key component of the sales process versus sales stage conversion much earlier in my sales and professional career. That was a big aha moment for me.
Love it, Todd. That's a great one. Really appreciate it. Walter, Jeff, who wants to go next?
I think with data is don't expect perfection. Perfection is always hard to get in data. No data is ever perfect. Data goes between your CRM and your marketing automation platform and other systems. And just understand it's not going to be perfect. I could look at any report. I'm sure we all have looked at reports and go, yeah, that number's off, right? Like that number doesn't seem right. Understand that the data should at least be able to tell you a direction. So if a number's off a little bit, okay, just accept that and understand that, if something is much bigger than, a number of, opportunities that are generated from a trade show are much larger than ones that come from content syndication, that gives you a direction. If it's off by a little bit, just understand that's a normal process. No data is perfect. Use it for directional, you can still have a direction on your decisions by the data that you have.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
Yep, I agree.
Humans still have a place.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Walter.
I would just add to what was previously said, right? Is that there's so much data. I guess what I would have told myself years ago is that there is going to be so much data coming to you that accuracy is paramount to that, but understanding directionally what that information is telling you, right? Don't be overwhelmed by the data that's coming, and we'll use technology to be able to automate, to be able to directionally send you in the way you want to go, right? It's not down to the dot numbers to get to perfection. So that's what I would have told myself years ago. Data's coming. Data's coming.
I love it. Good stuff. I would summarize my view as I'm putting the head of a CMO here is it may not sound sexy or cool to invest in data, foundation, and operations. But if you don't do that well, especially if you're targeting upmarket, good luck later on justifying, analyzing, and understanding your entire go-to-market machine.
Yep.
So prioritize it. Make sure there's an agreed upon priority and budget according to it, and get somebody to own it. It might not have to be you eventually. Gentlemen, Jeff, Todd, and Walter, amazing gurus in the world of go-to-market and revenue leadership. Thank you for your pearls of wisdom. The Datavana show is smarter because of your appearance. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.